Welcome. Thank you. I'm Shodo. I'm the Sukansu and the Shisui here at SokukoJi Buddhist Monastery, which means I help keep things going, trying to help with the programming and the property upkeep here. I just want to invite anyone who finds value in these teachings to please participate either by joining us for the Dharma talks from either Sokuzan or his monks, his students. Join us for any of the book studies throughout the week, even just one time throughout the week would be great to see you in our Zendo or to join us online. We could really use your help with your practice, joining us, and also financially to help us keep the programming going here. So thank you very much.
I thought I would come in here and blow my nose. Sorry, I can't help it.
Blessings rain down upon us all. I think someone said that
Receive them as they appear, yes?
something important happens after you blow your nose, so I think that's auspicious.
Usually, someone pointed that out not too long ago. Seems like it was, I don't know who it was, somebody important. What's next? You're the teacher.
All right, let's rein it in, go home.
Go home.
Nap time. That's how you get all the monks to like you. Right, I know. So thank you everyone for joining. We'll go right into the talk tonight. Tonight, if you've attended the past few months when I've been asked to talk, Sokuzan had asked me to go into the addiction awareness meditation material, which is sort of by design Sokuzan's teaching without using too many Buddhist concepts, and it actually officially went live today. If you order one, you don't have this band go across it, you'll have a real one, but they're up on there.
Where are they?
On Amazon. You can type addiction awareness meditation.
How much are they?
$24.99. Act now and you can pay full price, just like everybody else.
And leave a review.
And leave a review only if it's 5 stars. Anything else? So tonight we will be advertising. We were talking a little earlier where even though sort of ironically this is the least quote unquote Buddhist text that Sokuzan's put out, but it's the most like Dharma text one. Like it actually it almost reads like cutting through to me. It's like it's Sokuzan's teachings that were given in I'm assuming among other places in a local rehab down the road that's no longer there, where I met him actually. And it reads really well. I can't put the book down. His other books are a little bit more instructional, but this one's basically, like I was saying, a Dharma text. And he's got a lot of original artwork in the text that he drew for this book. So if you like his art, you'll have a little treat there too. There's 2 parts that I thought were pretty inspiring, and we'll be launching a group that's going to meet around this material, not here in the monastery, but in another building, where we're going to invite people in, basically like Sokuzan and some other students used to do in the local rehab, which is some guided meditation. And now we have a source material that we can study together. So it'll be sort of like what you might be familiar with if you've ever joined like the Kalamazoo group or the Grand Rapids group. When we go to another place, there's a little bit of meditation and a little bit of study, but it'll be around this text. So hopefully it'll resonate with some people who don't necessarily want to learn Buddhism, and they also don't necessarily want to go to like a 12-step group. So huge market for this, I think. I met with John at the local, how would you categorize some at point? Kind of the catch-all for?
Basically outpatient addiction treatment services.
So the gentleman there, the recovery coach there was, I won't use his.
Can't quote him.
You can't quote him. He used some profanity. He was quite excited about the book. He's like, I'll be there myself. So he's excited. He thinks it's great. I was pretty surprised someone in his position was as open-minded as he was, like just really appreciating that everyone needed to work with this differently. And that's what's so amazing about this material. So two of the teachings that SokukoJi has in here, and these shouldn't be surprising or brand new to you if you've studied SokukoJi for a while, or even a short time. But two of his teachings, one, his image of meditation practice or mind training being like sharpening the knife. I really like how he says it in here. And I don't know that I've caught him saying this outside of this, so I like that someone caught him saying this. So, and of course it's disappeared now that it's time to talk about it. Here it is. So just observe, so this is from his text, SokukoJi's words. So just observe, in other words, if you use the image of a knife, you're just sharpening the knife, like when you're meditating. In particular, formless meditation, I think, would meet this description. So just observe. Imagine how a knife feels, useless. That's how you'll know, that's how you'll feel if you're doing meditation correctly, useless. I like that. I think we might open the addiction awareness group with that line just so people get an idea what they're in for. And then the other side of it, he goes into some other meditation techniques a little later on. He says, of the other technique, you could call that other practice meditation. You could call this meditation, but they are very different. This is more of a technique, as I understand it, for relaxation, calming yourself down. That's what most people will likely be looking for. But I like how he says it here. But if you're magnetized or interested in what we're doing here, then this will be more difficult because this is actually a discipline rather than a relaxation. And you might get relaxation from this, but the relaxation you get will be completely genuine and immovable. And if shit hits the fan, you don't run, nor do you run towards it, nor do you look away. You might get a face full of shit, of course. And I just like, as I always have with SokukoJi's teaching, that he's not like, I don't think intentionally being aggressive, but he's just trying not to BS us. It's probably going, I think he even says it in here, it's probably going to get harder or worse before it gets better, if it ever does. You know, I feel like, at least with personally with my body situation, I'm 10 years into practicing, which, as SokukoJi said, that's not very long. That's like the first step. As Kobun says, the first 10 years are hard, the second 10 years are even worse or even harder. So yippee. I'm looking at a couple, actually, basically everyone in here has practiced longer than I have. Sorry, I'm really excited and I completely forgot everything I was saying. But it's like my body personally is just now to the point, if it's even a point where I can start sitting down again. I've been fighting, like my body's just been giving me difficulty this whole time. My first retreat there's been like these phases in the monastery where there's like these different health trends and things that everyone eventually does. But when I first started coming here, there were these things called nada chairs. I still think we have a big pack of them in the back because we wrote to the company and they sent us a bunch because we're a monastery. They're basically, and I think they're a traditional Tibetan tool where they would tie ropes around their knees so to hold themselves in meditation posture for a long time. So when my body is so uncooperative, I had to strap myself into a chair for my first retreat. But anyway. I have more excitement than I do content right now. I'm just really happy that this book's happening. I don't want to get out of giving a talk, but if there's maybe a question or something that can ground me a little bit into the material.
How many hours did you put into getting that book out?
10 years. I was working on this when I still had a wife.
Solved that problem.
Solved that problem.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge how grateful I am to you and to everyone else who's worked on this book. It's just a lot of work, not just the things that I've said, but all getting it together to actually publish a book has been quite, using a lot of your energy and everyone else, Odo's energy and other people. Everyone in here has contributed in some way to this, so appreciate it very much.
And even beyond me, there was a few campaigns or groups of people who put a lot of time and energy. This stuff started off way before AI, when people were actually taking audio recordings and typing them out and then compiling those.
I've been working on this book for 8 or 10 years.
Yeah,
Easily.
easily. And then the material, I think it's cited to go back from like '09. So what is that, like 16 years at this point since
Somewhere in that area.
So, yeah, yes, please.
Milka Bowing, could you read the quote about becoming useless?
So this is in Sokuzan's section on you can't sharpen a knife and use it at the same time, which we've heard that teaching. He says, so just observe. In other words, if you use the image of a knife, you're just sharpening the blade, just observing. Observe, observe. Imagine how a knife feels. Useless. That's how you'll feel if you're doing meditation correctly. Useless. And then if you're doing it correctly, it'll feel completely boring. If it feels entertaining, keep doing it. It won't last long. When people say, oh, I'm meditating, I feel so good, I say, well, why don't you turn around and I'll kick you in the ass and see how that feels. So it's an entertaining read. Yeah.
No wonder I'm so unpopular.
Milka Bowing, what came to mind when I first heard you read that was when you have the sentiment, what's the use? Kind of like you reach the end of your rope and it's like, why go on? Why continue? So what is this saying in the book about becoming useless? How is that different than just kind of giving up and saying, oh, what's the use?
It might be saying the same thing. The reason, and maybe other people don't feel this way, but when a teacher is letting you know that, it might give you a little bit of encouragement, I guess you could say, when that shows up, to not necessarily believe that. Like he's kind of giving you a warning, like if it feels boring or useless, keep going. And I can't help but feel biased here that you probably need a teacher to actually meet you and talk to you, because there's been so many times that it just was like that wasn't enough just to know that it's going to feel useless, because when you're in the thick of that, it's believable and you just want to quit and just do something else. And I can't count how many times Sokuzan says that this is one of my favorite teachings, do it anyway. And it's so infuriating to hear that. It's like, no, give me an out, like tell me how it's going to get better. But something really genuine and adult about that, just do it anyway. It doesn't make it feel better, but maybe through doing that over and over again, there's a little insight that it's not going to last and that you can just keep going. Did I get to what you were actually asking though?
Milka Bowing, yes. What's coming up now though is if we feel we are sitting and there is something useful happening, are we missing what we should be doing?
I don't think so. Like he says, it won't last, and sometimes it just feels good to sit. I still have that show up and am curious, like, all right, what did I do now where I can make that happen again? Because I would much rather feel good every time I sit down. So maybe the second 10 years is when that really gets ground down. I don't know. I'm scared. But you guys have been, you've been a student of Sokuzan's probably longer than anybody, and you live where I live, so that's encouraging. And you've been practicing, you're on your 3rd or 4th decade at this point yourself.
Milka Bowing, but I did quit kind of for 15 years because it was kind of that feeling of, oh, what's the use? And I didn't have a teacher at that time, so I feel like having a teacher in a Sangha makes a huge difference also.
Yeah, that's as I'm going around here in town and talking to different counselors, and when I'm talking to them, I'm realizing I'm talking about this place, the local rehab, AFR, is what it was called, A Forever Recovery. It's not there anymore, and it's just kind of weird to, like we were talking the other day, I think, where that was a group of people who would come every Wednesday, every Sunday. Granted, a lot of people just wanted to get out of the building and didn't want to go to church, but there was a couple people, I'm thinking of a couple people who came after they left that program and stayed here for a month and really sank down into the practice. And just going around and talking and hearing how that's not available anymore is kind of sad. They were dwindling. We actually got fired from going in, I think, for budget reasons before COVID, but then when COVID hit, they just closed down. Yeah, please.
I think maybe you can correct me, but it seems like there was over 1,000 people sometimes going in there at a time.
Oh, wow.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were there, going from all over the country and doing all kinds of, not only a little bit of meditation, but also a moral inventory and 12-step programs. And maybe you can remember some of the other things.
Yes, they called them tracks there, and that's Summit Point said that they used the same idea where they just try to give you every tool that's available, which I thought was pretty great. Some people were just in there to have a bad time. They just didn't want to be there, but I thought that they did a good job giving you the best shot you had at working with it. Like if you wanted Buddhism, here, let's get you into that. If you wanted to go to church, let's get you into that. So they did CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, your traditional 12 steps, so like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. They did indigenous. John Sabitze was working there. He was a native man, and he offered a class with his religious structure, I guess you could say. And then you came in, they called it the holistic track because there was another person who came in and taught meditation, so that kind of included both of you. But you were there more than anyone. You were there 3 of the 4 days, and you just did the one other day or something like that.
And eventually students, I went in for several years, and then I started taking students in with me. And then when they got the idea of what was happening, then I would leave. And then the last few years, it was just monks from the monastery going in.
Yes, that's my memory of it too. Elena?
Elena Bowing, can you go into a little more detail about how the metaphor of how the mind is like a knife and meditation is like sharpening a blade? Bowing.
The full picture there that SokukoJi uses is that when you're out in your day and you're going through your thought process, you're chopping stuff, the idea that maybe that's dulling the knife, and if you don't ever take time to sit down and just sharpen it, you're just continually dulling an already dull knife. You're going through your life with a butter knife, going through like horribly cooked steak, and it's just painful. So the image there is just, I guess I'll stop there. Is there more that you had around that?
I guess why do we, I don't know, I just want it more flushed out, I guess, the imagery of it.
So I'll try. I think it's important to have a teaching like that with formless meditation because it's so simple, it can be really disappointing because it's, how many times have you heard someone complain or bring up the situation to SokukoJi? He's like, that's awareness, that's it. And it's like, no, I'm presenting a problem, sir, please receive this as a problem. He's like, no, that's the practice. So that can suck to feel that way. You sit down and it just doesn't feel like you're meditating, and you hear, well, that's the practice. You just do it anyway. You feel useless. So that's the value in that. I don't know if that's what you're asking with that. Shodo.
SokukoJi Bowing. I haven't read the book yet, and I'm excited to read it. And having applied some awareness around my own habit patterns, it seems like I have to have a willingness to just see it get worse, whatever the habit is. And I'm wondering, with something like some of the substances you've been into and others, how that shows up, because that seems really dangerous. It's just you're just putting awareness on something that could basically kill you.
Mm-hmm. And that's a question in here too. I remember that talk. Q&A with that exact question, like how do you keep from dying when the situation is deadly, like to work with that. It is not surprising, but it seems so situational. I don't know how else to do that other than working really closely with someone who works with addicts or that situation, be it a Dharma teacher or just a really intuitive healthcare practitioner. I think you need a lot of structure in that area, and it's not to say structure so that you can go experiment with drugs, but that structure might be where it's like, no, you're not doing that, and there's just no budging on that. Because that was my experience of it. So I worked really closely together on that. And I've never just been like given permission to go and do whatever the hell I want. Not that it's about permission exactly, but I need to work with it in that way. So we were at a comedy show in New York when I first moved in here. The guy joked, he said, "Was this guy like your probation officer?" And I said, "That's truer than you think."
So I'd like you to say a little bit more about the two images and the contrast between the knife that you're sharpening and the knife that you're chopping vegetables with, or the awareness that you're just watching the awareness come and go in the mind stream, like kind of useless thing that you're doing, and the other one where you're thinking, processing, analyzing, judging, concluding, and so on. Comment on that. I think that's what Elena was kind of asking you about.
Thank you. Another way you've said it to kind of expand on that is that that it doesn't feel good for the knife. Like if a knife's being drug across the surface, it's painful probably. Like you're rubbing it across a grit, and that's how it can feel to sit and not do anything with what's happening. Like it's that feeling of abrasion when we're out, and not that it's probably painful in its own way, but something about the spinning when we're out and chopping kind of, it seems like it helps to ignore some of the painful parts. But when you sit down and you've used like the food processor, you unplug the food processor and everything starts to kind of fall down, like sort of doesn't feel good once that starts to move the other direction. So chopping, you get a little credential. I can't speak super literally here, but there's something about that activity where when you get to use it, you get some kind of feedback where maybe it's ignorance. Yeah, that image is falling apart there for me, but back to like the sharpening, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel, if you've ever sharpened a knife on a whetstone, it's horrible. It takes forever. It's a very not fun experience to sharpen a knife. And then you've also said too, where having a sharper knife, I asked you this once, like, do we dull it again and you have to sharpen it again? But it seems like if the knife is sharp and we keep sharpening it, we actually can work with the areas where we're chopping stuff up better. Like if we have a sharper knife, then we don't need to use it as hard, maybe even as much when we're going out, where we might, again, it's getting very literal here, but cut through what we're looking at more easily or cleanly. We're actually sharper about what we're looking at. So it's really beneficial in that way, but as you say, it just takes so long. You almost hesitate to tell people how long, but it does feel like over a very long time, there is some kind of recognition that that's a helpful practice. You just can't really put it in the words. Anything else on that? Thank you. And that's not to say, as I keep bringing it back to a formalist practice, I will likely, so I'm going to help facilitate that class next door where people will come in and very likely the first time and maybe the only time that they'll meditate, they will probably not be going straight into Shikantaza. We'll do a little bit of guided meditation. Because like we were talking, a few of us here have been in some kind of addiction situation, and it's rare that someone would be ready to just do that right away because your body and mind are really tormented. not that we aren't all tormented, but there's a chemical thing going on that really complicates it. So we need to be respectful of where people are and try to meet them in that. I remember one of the instructors came in and I never called them out or asked them about it, but someone was having a really hard time, like they were in withdrawal, they're trying something out, and she's suffering, and she shares something about it, and the instructor says, "Oh, good, not a lot of people, like sometimes it takes people a really long time to see that." And it's like, that's not helping her right now. It didn't feel like to me he was kind of lording over her. So trying to meet people where they're at and not just expect everyone to jump into formless practice. Elena?
Elena Bowing, to continue with this knife situation, in what ways do we dull the knife when we're using it in everyday life?
It's a good question. It's like what I was saying earlier, I wonder if it dulls less if we sharpen it more, kind of. I think we dull it when we're not aware of what we're doing. So when we keep bringing it back to that awareness practice, we're clearer about sharpening a knife. And I would say that we're probably clearer about how we go out and use it. And maybe with that clarity, it doesn't dull so much, or it does, and we just know how to work with it. We have a form to come back to so we can practice.
Elena Bowing, and how can we relate that to how that might be beneficial if we're looking for that to even be a thing for people that are studying this book?
I'm trying to bring that image, like chopping vegetables, a little bit more concretely. So like going through our conceptual mind, picking and choosing, that seems to be when we're out and using that knife and dulling it. Like, what about this? What about this? Like chop, 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 chop. So with some space or some sitting practice, it seems like we're a little clearer about how circular that is. Not that we don't get hooked by that and want to go into this and that, but maybe seeing more clearly what that's about. And the actual full title of the chapter is you can't sharpen a knife and use it at the same time. So there's another part of that image that I haven't gotten into yet, which is not like condemning meditation in action, but it is a teaching in that area too, where when you're sitting, you just sit. That's what you're doing. When you get up, as he said, let it rip, where you're not really intentionally trying to be mindful off the cushion. You can't sharpen the knife and use it at the same time out in the world. So practice when you practice, and when you get up, live your life. I guess you could say trust that the practice is doing what it needs to. Just might take a long time. And you might not ever get like a credential or a recognition that this helped me do this. Might be more of a big picture than that.
Hondo Bowing, how, this is addiction, and addiction is so associated with drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I think we're all addicted. How are we, how does this apply to the broader?
As SokukoJi says, this material is extremely specific to your way of being confused, and you can use this technique to customize the way you work with your addiction through being aware of it. If you try to figure it out with logic, analysis, and thinking, you just play into the very cause of the problem itself. The addiction to right and wrong, correct and incorrect, ethics, commentary of your mother and father, and the structures in society that you have been raised to think are correct. So that covers like everybody, as far as I know. And to go back to AFR a little bit, they treated every addiction. It's kind of messed up, but there was a kid who was in there for like, he got in trouble for weed or something, and these other guys were telling him like, don't share that with people, like that's why you're in here, because it was like they didn't think it was serious enough, and they thought he was going to get like picked on because he didn't have a real addiction, which was ridiculous. But they covered like sex addiction, gambling addiction, video game addiction. There were people in there with addictions that the doctor had never even heard of. They're like, you're addicted to what? So they I think at least in that community, and as I understand it, people are pretty open that it's not just like substances. I think it's up to the individual, but it's when that grasping or habit pattern becomes a problem.
Hondo Bowing, I wanted to see if you'd go into that a little bit more. What makes the behavior or habit, what makes it cross that line into an addiction?
I thought that would be a good question for me to ask you as a medical professional. I think my understanding of it, it's a lot of angles, because you have like the chemical dependence, you have like the psychological dependence, you can be physically addicted but not psychologically addicted. So it's like, which one are we talking about here? So on one aspect, you might not have like that emotional response to it, but you need to do such and such. And I think a lot of people's would fall into that, where they have to tell their kids to do something this way. And I think everyone had this thing like their parents made them do that really didn't make sense. And once you find out that other kids didn't have to do that, you're like, what were my parents doing there? And it seemed more about them controlling something, maybe rooted in control. So back to your question though, it seems like at the root of it, there's some recognition that it's a problem, or that it's preventing you from doing like your bare minimum, or like what you need to do. And that's so subjective that 6 people could be talking about completely different things. They're all using addiction, or 6 people could have the same thing and 2 of them don't think it's an addiction. And then is it an addiction? Can you accuse somebody of being addicted if they're not recognizing that? Does that get at what you're asking about?
Wonderbong, I also want to kind of explore like withdrawal and tolerance. If something if there's not a substance involved, but a behavior instead, looking at that samsara, that circle, that attempt to do something about the addiction. Do you see anything that you could name, like with a behavior addiction or a thought addiction, that would be akin to withdrawal or tolerance that you would see from somebody with a substance, Valley?
Yes. I could share something personally, somewhat vaguely. I've gone through some pretty intense, like traditional substance withdrawals. And then after that, there was a partner I was trying to pursue that turned me down, and I had the same experience. I had a like physical withdrawal and I got shut down. Like I had cold sweats all night, and like it felt horrible, but I was really curious about it. I was like, that was a drug withdrawal from that. And then like if you've ever switched to like a keto diet, when you kick out all that sugar and carbs, that is a full-on drug withdrawal. Like that does not feel good. Like it's all the symptoms. You're losing like that main thing your body's used to. So I don't think it's unique to chemical addictions. It's something about, it might not even be like a super hard grasping at it, but just the consistency. Can I ask what's funny?
Humor. I have no story. I'm just thinking about my own addictions, how funny they are.
But am I getting at what you're asking about though?
Well, I also was looking at like how the withdrawal and tolerance experience kicks the wheel.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I've seen it where you can actually fill it back in with something that's not the actual cause. You can fill it in with a story and just like explain it away, like, oh, that's cool because we weren't going to work out because this. But like you can use that mental process to just pack it full and ignore it again. How do you talk about that?
Wonderbong, is there something addictive about the cycle?
I think so. I think we're addicted to the spinning. I really like that image of someone being self-centered. Like, I don't think that's a condemnation. I think that's just descriptive. Like there's like a tornado going on here, and that spinning lets that continue. And I'm not saying I have some like deep insight into that, but it seems like that's kind of, Trungpa Rinpoche talks about that, like little dust devils, or like people are these little tornadoes of stuff where there's nothing actually there in the middle. Like if you look down in a dust devil, there's nothing there. It's just like an arbitrary point that this tornado is spinning around. So it feels like we're addicted to that because that's what we're identified with. We might be able to get that tornado going with nice things. And if that falls apart, we don't care. We just need something to spin so we can feel like somebody. Like we can feel separate from stuff and move around through space.
Isn't it I'm not a meteorologist or a weather person or anything, but isn't it the contrast between hot and cold that causes the spinning? Does anyone know?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, this,
Pressure system.
just so that's a very simple contrast of just temperature alone. There's nothing personal about it. It's just hot on one side and cold on the other.
So then what about meditation? Is helpful or, to see something like that samsara or that cycle that we're so addicted to because that's our identification. How does addiction awareness meditation address that?
I think that image of the food processor again is just perfect for that because a food processor just spins. As long as it's going, it's keeping the stuff around. So if we use the idea of meditation being like you're just unplugging that for a little bit, and I like how you just said it too, like if we're seeing samsara, I feel like if you're doing that, you're not actually seeing the spinning, like you're actually there in it and it just looks normal or you're going in a straight line. But if you sit down, that's kind of why it's so painful. You're actually watching how difficult your life is, how painful it is just to spin around like that. So if that image tracks a little bit, you're introducing some time in your day out of the many other hours where you are spinning, where you're just gonna try your best to watch that or pull the plug on that, do as little as possible with that.
Well, Divine, it seems like it'd take a crazy amount of motivation or something in order to sit down and look at that kind of spinning.
And I think that motivation, especially if you're gravitating towards a book like this and you're calling yourself an addict, you've gone far enough into that where you recognize that you're having a very hard time doing what you think you should, or as it's said in some groups, like your best thinking got you into this room. So clearly it's not done so good for you. So I think the suffering or just seeing how it doesn't work to keep doing that can be very inspiring. That can be hard after a while, especially if it's kind of ironically, your life might kind of clear out better, but then you don't have any relative situation to point to when something's really painful. It's like, well, shit, like I haven't done such and such in 10 years. Why is it still so hard? And that can be an excuse to go back.
Just didn't mean to interrupt you and that, but I was curious as what your perception insight is about. We have all kinds of communities based on social compliance with everything, which is a kind of a cultish approach, believing that we all need to do this way or we all need to do it that way, that this is correct and everything else is wrong or incorrect. And that has different levels of it. But also the relationship in a situation, we could call it Sangha, but you could just call it people getting together to try to understand deeply and support each other through their awareness of what's happening, not so much the right and wrong part, and how that could differ a little bit from the way, and not to criticize 12-step programs, because I think they're very valuable for people who need to that kind of a social support structure. So I just wondered maybe if you have some insight around different community situations, having belonged to several of them.
So like what you're saying, someone might need to do each or some of those. The one situation where you're getting in, trying to speak really generically here, in a group that's around addiction is a problem, everyone agrees upon that. That's not even, you're not even questioning that, like everyone knows addiction is bad. And then you have a common enemy, and then in that situation there's sort of a culture of just sharing war stories or sharing oh, me too, like, oh, I feel that way too, which can be supportive. But if we're looking at it through a Buddhist lens, to say it that way, it's just really reifying a bunch of people, egos. Like everyone gets to feel really good because they get to talk about themselves. It just validates that whole experience that they had. They get to be someone, and they might help people that way too. But it really, in my experience, it can be nauseating, and I'm pretty pretentious, though. That's probably more about me. But it just didn't seem helpful to most people. And that's one of my big inspirations, is that hopefully I'm not even sure if they do drug court here like they did in Ohio, but you were kind of forced to go to a 12-step group because that's all that there was. But if this could be something else people could go to who don't want to subscribe to, even though they say it's not about God, like a lot of 12-step groups are using that word and say, oh, just put a different word there. It's like, that's hard for people, like especially if you're really against that. And some people don't want to just quit. Like if you don't have a desire to stop using, you're not eligible to be in those other groups. Like that's the first group. And then if you're looking at this, it's like, I can't control my desires. Like, what are you talking about? I still want to get high all the time. It's just.
So how is this particular situation of don't have to even mention Buddhism, but just an awareness practice, say the way you're going to be teaching it, or the way I was teaching it in drug rehab for many, many years. If it's an awareness practice, not trying to get someone to convert to Buddhism or something like that, but just to be aware of that rather than try to fix it. How does that show up for you? Why is it important to, from your perspective, to be aware of what's happening rather than try to look at it as a problem and see if there isn't some device that you can put on it or some way of stopping it or tool?
I'm brought to your teaching of you need to respect people's clarity and their confusion, because in that area, I feel like if you're telling someone drugs are bad and they don't recognize that yet, you're telling them to distrust their Buddha nature, is how I would say it. Like, they're convinced that that thing feels good and they might need to keep doing that until it does not feel good. So there's something jumping the gun in another situation where you're telling someone how something is and they haven't recognized that yet. And I think with the awareness practice, it gives someone the opportunity in their own mind stream, and this is all the stuff you've talked about, where it might need to breathe. You've used that image of breathing. It might need to go inhale and exhale a little bit so you can see the bigger picture of it.
Very good.
Elena?
Elena Bowing, in the 12 steps, they really emphasize giving it up to a higher power. And then this book, it's really emphasizing taking a look at our ultimate addiction, the self, how by contrast is either or both beneficial, and in which ways.
Some people might just gravitate naturally towards that, like they want or find support in putting something above themselves, and that can be helpful. I've used these programs before too, just to get some space around it. It can be helpful to just have an enemy and not do it. And then, like to your question, you might need to treat it as a bad guy and cut it off for a long time, for years or a decade. And then it might start to show up again, or any number of things. So there's something about that, like, I don't think it's super different with like having the idea of a power above, how is it phrased, like something greater than yourself, or a power greater than you, and looking at something like choiceless or powerless. Like, I think there's some honesty in that recognition that when you do that first drug or drink, it kind of runs itself. Like, the person who did that first one doesn't necessarily maintain to put their foot down after you had that first drink, and now you're just the drunk person who wants to drink 10 more. At least that's my experience of it. I can't just be like, I'm gonna have one drink because that person dies when I have the first drink, and I'm just gonna keep drinking all night. I'm learning that more now than ever. Like, oh, maybe it is a little self-feeding there. I don't have a lot of say so. So at a certain point, it's kind of semantics, like how you work with concepts in your mind. Some people might not even view those as super different. Am I getting at what you're asking though?
I guess to me they seem super different. One is a theistic approach where I'm just gonna give my problems to somebody else who's gonna shoulder them for me, versus where I'm taking a look at my addiction to myself and the circularity of things.
Yes, and it's almost like progressive when I hear it that way, where you might have to see how it doesn't work, or maybe it does work, but to like give someone else that authority, even in your own mind, to like a god or something you're praying to, and see that maybe it does work and you can work with that. But my experience seeing like even that's not enough, like it still comes back to me. And there might be, that might be enticing to people where they don't want to do that. Like they want to be the person who's practicing and working with their addiction. So they might be inspired to work with it themselves, because then I would say it this way, you're responsible for it. So there's a little bit of ownership in your recovery, to use that word. And Trungpa Rinpoche talks about that on the path, like you don't want to adopt an adult child, like adopt your awakening. You actually want to work with it, so you had the experience of raising that child. I think there's something to that too, where there's something rewarding, even working with your issues yourself. If you backed me in the corner, I probably wouldn't defend that. Anything else on that?
Thank you.
Jishin? We'll get to you in just a sec, James.
How would you motivate people whose motivation is fading away because of the increased pain which they see when they start meditating?
Jishin, you sound kind of bubbly, gurgly on our end. It's probably a tech problem. I couldn't make that out. Could you just try it again?
Bowing. How would you motivate people? Is it better?
I think so. Keep going.
How would you motivate people how would you encourage people whose motivation is fading away because of seeing more pain as a result of meditating?
That's a great question, but it's also so big. I can't give you like a really straight answer to it. It's so situational. Could you maybe give like an example, or just narrow that down a little bit? Not that it's a bad question at all. It's just you're asking me like the whole universe there.
Jishin Bowing, I'm aware that it is not an easy question. I work with people who are addicted, and I know that it is very difficult to continue. So when you see, maybe more concrete question would be, if you see that people are showing less interest because meditation is not working for them, what would be your approach?
I'll try to say a little bit. I'll have to answer it a couple different ways, I think. It depends on who they are. I can think, I've heard Sokuzan answer a question like, if someone was just coming here, you might just give them a lot of space and not really interfere at all. But if they were a monk and they've been your student for a decade, you might be a little bit more direct or specific with them and be like, no, you signed up for this, or you've taken vows twice. I've gotten that one a number of times, like, you've done this twice, and put it back on me. But that wouldn't have been helpful, like my first few years here, especially without formally receiving vows. So one thing I've seen here that's been helpful, and seen it look to help other people living here, is just giving them the space to curl up in a ball and go back to their room. I was told when I moved in here, because I was just falling asleep all the time, and they're like, it's about 3 years before you get caught up on your sleep and you can actually like come to practice. And it seems like that's sort of true. I think it's amazing how Sokuzan's encouraged us and set up the forums here, where there's a very tight schedule, but if anyone needs to not do that, they just say, hey, I can't make it tonight. And you might do that for years, like where you just can't, like 6 o'clock comes around, you're done, and you need to go to sleep. So I feel so lucky that I've been in a place where I can work some and also just go and sleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if I'm just crashing. Like, I don't know how someone could work with it when you just have to do a 9 to 5. Like, your boss isn't going to let you go take a little power nap every hour while your body and mind kind of settle down. So yeah, so situational and environmental. I think a good thing is just to have the support systems in place and to fund and encourage those things so people can get help in all the different ways that it shows up. And I'm learning this too, trying to help out with some other things here, just how hard it is, like systemically, to help people. Like if you want to be a place that helps people, they make it very hard to do that. It's so frustrating. It's like you have to be the one that's willing to like just take all the crap just so you can help people, and then take their crap. So you have to have some very inspired people who are insane in their own way, insane in a way that's helpful to others. Do you
Thank
see?
you. Thank you. Yes. Are you going to present yourself as a Buddhist monk and kind of bring examples from the Buddhist path and Buddhist practices?
A little bit. I do tend to use my Dharma name exclusively, except for a couple of times when I don't, and those people happen to stick around. And it's like, damn it. Like one of our contractors, he's called me Ryan for a decade now, and my new Tai Chi instructor, I just happen to call him, and I've been around him like all the time now. It's like, damn it. Should just use Shodo off the beginning. But in general, I use that, so that opens questions. Usually people really like that name. Like, oh, that's such a nice name. I'm really happy it's not Nishikai or something like that. Because mine at least sounds like sort of Irish, so they don't immediately go to like, what? But just a little bit. I do think I'll wear. We're going to find out together, I think. I'm
What did
not.
I tell you to wear?
So I asked Soka's on this. I can just respond. Thank you.
Yes.
Samoe and Araxu. So like he even called this out. This is too much for something like that.
So we also, if I may put a few, I also don't necessarily want you to go over there in a sports shirt and Bermudas. You know, I want it to be a little bit, just a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of the form. After all, this did come out of a 2,500-year tradition. It didn't come out of somebody, Bill and whatever his name is, coming up with this as they did 12-step program, which is an extremely valuable practice that entered right into the culture and really has helped a lot of people do what? Stay away from the drug. It has not helped them work through the fundamental addiction to a personal self. That's the issue.
Thank you. And that goes back to Elena's earlier question. And I heard this from Bruce Nelson once. It's like, oh, Jesus got him off alcohol. Now who's going to get him off of Jesus?
Is that Bruce?
That was Bruce. That one's stuck. James? Oh, sorry.
James Bowling.
Please.
Oh,
Go ahead.
James Bowling. Do you think that approaching meditation from the acclimation approach, like the Tibetans do with calling it Gom, getting used to, is a helpful way to introduce it to with addicts, like sobriety as something you get used to in the same way you get used to meditation?
Yeah, I do. I think it's more or less saying the useless thing at the same time. Like, I actually just talked with someone else the other day about bringing up that word when they were having a hard time, just sort of with a laugh. But yeah, like a gamden in a Tibetan tradition, like the round rectangular prism, the very square, not round cushion is called a gamden. And Sokuzan's shared that means they get used to it cushion.
Yes.
So, and that's something that shows up in the other recovery groups too, life on life's terms. And that's sort of in that teaching there where it's a heavy-handed way of saying as it is, if I'm giving them a lot of credit there, but that you're actually going to start receiving life, and after, they call it the pink cloud, where you kind of feel good because you're just not sick all the time, you have to start feeling how crappy life feels.
Yeah. And there's people with alcohol addiction that they can't go sober right away because of you can die suddenly if you go off alcohol or too far on it. So
Can I quiz you, James?
sure.
What's the other drug that'll kill you if you quit it?
It's not fentanyl, is it?
Uh-uh.
Nicotine? Cocaine?
Benzodiazepines.
Oh, those are tranquilizers, aren't they?
You could say that. What was your question though? I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
How do you have compassion for people that are, I don't know, they're stuck in a situation where they can't go cold turkey, you know, right away?
Yeah, that's a good question. Two things I'd say. One, I don't think you can really have compassion, but there's something in compassion that's less about feeling any particular thing and maybe more of a recognition that you're also like that. Maybe not in the same way, but it's more of like a recognition that like, ow, like I do that too, and just seeing that in somebody else, like they're just as messed up as me. There's something compassionate in that. So not thinking that your brand of crazy is better because you cannot do your thing for 3 days and not die. It's unfortunate that there are things that, like you said, like alcohol, you can die. Like if you go to certain hospitals, my understanding is they literally have prescription beers in there that the doctors will give you so you keep well. Or if you go into a rehab, they'll prescribe Librium as because you'll die if you just don't do it.
So, how do you work in non-theism or anti-theism into it, since a lot of addicts, they can go from non-theism to a theistic view, and that can be anti-Buddhist in a sense.
I'm not too sure. That's the nice thing, at least with the way Sokuzan set this material up, and the fact that it wasn't like this plan. Like this is just what happened when he met addicts. Like this is the teaching that came out of that, and it just so happens that a lot of the Buddhist concepts explicitly fall away. But this is a full-on sutra, in my opinion, and he does dip into it. Like if you go to the index, I want to say, there's like Alaya Vijnana shows up in here, so he's not like completely avoiding it, and I mean, he's using his Dharma name. It's known that he's a Buddhist, but I think we're kind of fortunate, at least in my experience of it. There's this kind of ignorant appreciation for Buddhism in the medical community. Like oh great, the religion that's been helping people with the stuff that we're just now learning is valuable, like meditation, which can be beneficial, and also, as we've seen or I've seen, people get idealistic about that and think they know what this practice is. But would you say, Ondo, like there's kind of a recognition that meditation and some of these practices have some value?
Yeah, it seems like it's the treatment du jour right now.
Du jour. And
Or psychedelics too. So there's trends. And so right now mindfulness, but it's been there for 10 years.
Ayahuasca.
And there's some bad implications with it in the medical community.
what was that? One more time, James? I didn't catch that first part.
Aren't there some bad implications and connotations in the medical community with mindfulness? Because it kind of implies, deal with your own problems, stop being a hypochondriac.
I don't know. I don't know that I've heard that. The only thing I can think of is I did a study as a participant at Wright State where the coordinator, the person running the study was a Buddhist, and they were wanting to see how people who did and didn't meditate, those strange questions they were asking, like, after you've meditated, how do you feel about the salience of objects around you? I was like, what the hell are they asking about? But that's what they're trying to see, if you could see objects more or less discreetly. And I think I just completely ruined their study, because I practiced more than anyone in that study, I bet. And I said, like, I can't tell anything apart anymore. And I think they were assuming that it was going to lead to some kind of relative clarity where everything got clearer.
Where was that?
It was at Wright State, down at the Dayton campus. We talked about that a little bit because I asked about it.
It's coming back, that's why I was asking you. You seem to remember that. It's been years ago.
Yeah, it's been almost a decade ago, and my ex-wife and I both went to do that, and she at the time was practicing a bit. But to what you were asking there, why that came up, James, was that's the only time I saw it sort of negative, was that she had to admit that she was a practitioner, and that was a kind of bias in the study, and that in the medical community, just because of that, automatically sort of made her test less valid, even though she claimed it, because she's a religious person and trying to sort of promote this narrative or support her view of how things are, but not in the way that I'm understanding you to ask about it. I've not run into that.
Okay. Yes, that's the self-reporting problem as well. I mean, there's also,
1 second, James, I want to come to
I
one
think
back
that
here.
they don't consider the,
Oh, yeah, Yokas, 1 second.
Yoka bowing, in the book, does it talk about fuel for addiction? If so, what is it?
It's a good question. While I did help edit it, I haven't actually read it cover to cover yet. So I'm going to the last index. Does the word fuel come up? Full moon does. Fear comes up quite a bit. Fuel. I'm sure it does in some sense, if not like literally. Is there something more about that?
Yoka bowing, I was just thinking of how, like, conventionally, we want to cut off somebody's drugs or their, whatever their addiction, cut it off so they don't get that, and we might call that a fuel, but it seems like with meditation, you're working with something else, like as far as fuel, and I was just curious about how that shows up for you as far as addiction, and what do you, like, a non-meditator might look at something to blame. So I'm curious, if we start meditating, what is it that we start to look at that might show us what any kind of how that mechanism is set up, that we feel we need to use a drug or whatever it is.
This might not be exactly what you're asking, but what's coming up, and I feel is unique about how Sokuzan's presenting this material, is that it's less about the addiction and more about looking at the addict. So something about bringing it back to this, say it sort of transcends the relative cause about what we're addicted to and starts to question even that, like seeing how, and there's probably some recognition from people who've been what they would consider themselves addicted, that can show up in other places. Like you might have the first thing that sort of crossed that threshold of problem, but it's been my experience that there's a little bit of a recognition that it's more about the hand grabbing it than what you're grabbing. Like this is painful regardless of what's in your hand. And I think Sokuzan's teachings point us back to that, to the grasping itself, and not so much, not at the exclusion of the substances, like you're saying, like there's still dangerous things that can land in there that kill the hand. But looking back at the grasping, something more fundamental. So I think, and maybe that's not what you're asking about.
No, that's exactly where I was trying to get into, that area.
And he says something, like there's a medical disclaimer in the book, because some of these things, it's like, you read that at the wrong time, like that might be a lot. Like there's a line in here where he's like, if you're really clear about it, you can continue being an addict or something like that. Now, that would be a section that I imagine in a talk he'd be like, ask me questions about this, because like on the face, like someone can really run with that. But there's something to that though. Like I think there's something powerful with this way, where you don't have to have a different mind stream. You don't have to stop wanting to do drugs, because you can be clearer about what that is and see that can show up and still not have to do anything with it. Whereas I think in some other programs, they're trying to change the thought process to where you don't get tempted by that anymore, and that might work for a while, but it's partial, I feel, because you're still in training yourself to respond to the mind stream in a particular way. So when that changes again against your will, like it will, you've just trained yourself to listen to your mind stream more, so that it comes back around. It's like, oh, well, now I have to listen to it when it says go do the drug again.
So is it possible to, just by having the emphasis that was showing up here, the emphasis on awareness of what is happening, is it possible that something like addiction, which is conventionally thought of as addiction in any direction, all the different kinds of addictions that can show up, is it possible that just by being aware, having really, really strong awareness that possibly the addiction could do any number of things? It could increase, it could get lower, it could get, because the dependent origination is very hard to ferret out any first cause for anything. So I realize I'm making a comment on that or responding in a way that, pardon me, can you say something about that, about your understanding? What's been your understanding of how awareness of form is what needs to be done rather than the strategies to change forms or get rid of addictions?
To the first part is, yes, I do think the awareness can do something very fundamentally whatever the hell it wants kind of thing. Like, it can get better, it can get worse. And what's scary about this way of working with it is it's sort of inviting that extreme to show up, because you're not trying to just keep it away. I mean, after we met, I got in the most trouble a year after that, like more trouble than before we met. So it's like it got worse. And actually started practicing again in a jail cell one night. Like, I hadn't talked to you for a while, and then like the practice came back to me when I was on my own in front of the little toilet there. But it's more like a big picture situation. Like, if it's going to stop, it might need to take some really big turns on its own, and you might need to watch that so it can actually stop, instead of you just keeping it at bay for 40 years.
Thank you, well said. Thank you.
And I understand one of the two founders of AA on his like deathbed wanted to drink, and they wouldn't give it to him because like, he had to be like, no, we're not going to let you leave on this note. Like, give the guy a drink, he's dying. Thank you. Hondo?
What about the rattlesnake on the cover?
It's an original artwork by SokukoJi, 2025. I turned it green in Photoshop. He drew it black. What do you want to know about it?
What is it there for? What is it?
Well, the stock cover looked bad. So, so if we go in a little further, I'm glad you asked. The very first like actual piece of meat in here is addiction as a rattlesnake, and he's got a picture of it, of a rattlesnake with a jelly roll. And you can see they look kind of similar. They're both a coiled up, shiny thing. And the idea is like you reach in to a cookie jar, and then your hand's in there, it's a rattlesnake. So there's like a bunch of teachings of SokukoJi's that help illustrate that, like bad neighborhoods, like you're able to project, when it comes into projection, so much onto that. You're like like you're cherry picking all the good parts of the experience. It's like a breakup. You can either remember that, like grasping at evidence, all the bad stuff, like, oh, it was never a good relationship, or what happens with addicts is you just happen to forget all the bad stuff. So, oh, remember how good it was when I did that? So you see this cookie jar there, and you reach your hand in there, and it's a rattlesnake. So, like he says here, I don't use the word recovery like some people do. I talk about addiction awareness. It's like rattlesnake awareness. And this is really powerful. He talks about it here. I think I remember it enough. It's probably a few pages into it, but like you don't need controls to keep your hand out of a fire. And that's what's so powerful about using the awareness with it for me, is if you're not ready to keep your hand out of the cookie jar, you're kind of lying to yourself. So, man, it really looks like a cookie jar there still. So there's a little bit of warfare there. But if you're really clear that it's a rattlesnake, that you don't really need to, there's no resistance there. It's just like, I'm not going to stick my hand in that. It's ridiculous. So that's what I would say about the snake.
Is it connected to the wheel Dharma?
1 second. I actually realized it's way later than I thought it was, and I think we need to close. So I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, my bad. Thank you.